The champagne glass felt cold against Gabrielle's palm as she stood near the marble pillar, watching her husband touch another woman's lower back. Not a casual touch, not an accidental brush. His fingers lingered there, familiar and possessive, while Rebecca smiled up at him with the kind of intimacy that only comes from repetition. Gabrielle had suspected for months. The late meetings that ran past midnight. The new cologne. The way Alexander's phone was suddenly always face down on every surface. But suspicion and confirmation are two different countries, and she just crossed the border into a place where everything looked sharper, colder, more real. The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered around her, 500 of New York's wealthiest residents pretending to care about childhood literacy while they compared stock portfolios and vacation homes. Gabrielle had helped organize this gala for 3 years running. She'd chosen the flowers, approved the menu, smiled until her face ached while making small talk with people who saw her only as Alexander's wife. She watched her husband lean down to whisper something in Rebecca's ear. The young woman laughed, touching the diamond necklace at her throat. Gabrielle recognized it. She'd admired it in Tiffany's window 6 months ago, mentioned it to Alexander in passing. He told her it was too expensive, they needed to be more careful with spending. Apparently, careful meant buying it for someone else. Gabrielle set down her champagne glass and walked toward the bathroom, her emerald green gown catching the light with each step. Inside the marble sanctuary, she locked herself in a stall and pulled out her phone. Her hands didn't shake. That surprised her. She'd imagined this moment would feel more dramatic, more emotional. Instead, she felt calm, almost detached, like she was watching herself from somewhere outside her body. She opened her banking app. Joint accounts, all of them, built on the foundation of her trust fund from her late father. She transferred half of everything into her personal account. Not illegal. Not even questionable. Just a wife protecting herself. Next, she called her childhood friend Natasha, who answered on the second ring despite the late hour. "I need a place to stay tonight," Gabrielle said quietly. "Can I come over?" "Always," Natasha responded without hesitation. "What happened?" "I'll explain when I get there." Gabrielle ended the call and stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was 32 years old, beautiful by conventional standards, educated at Columbia, and about to become single. Her father had built a real estate empire before dying of a heart attack when she was 25. Her mother had remarried and moved to France. Gabrielle had no siblings, no children, nothing tying her to Alexander except 5 years of marriage and the slow death of trust. She walked back into the ballroom and made her way through the crowd, accepting air kisses and deflecting questions about where Alexander had gone. She saw him near the bar now, Rebecca nowhere in sight but probably waiting upstairs in whatever room he'd booked for after the event. Gabrielle picked up her clutch from their table and started toward the exit. As she passed Alexander's chair, she saw it. The hotel keycard, sitting half-tucked under his phone. Room 2847. She picked it up, slipped it into her clutch and kept walking. The doorman hailed her a taxi. She gave Natasha's address and leaned back against the seat, watching the city lights blur past the window. Her phone buzzed. Alexander, probably noticing her absence. She turned off the phone. At Natasha's penthouse in Tribeca, her friend opened the door in pajamas, took one look at Gabrielle's face and pulled her into a hug. "He's cheating," Gabrielle said into Natasha's shoulder. "With his assistant. I saw them together." "That absolute piece of trash," Natasha said, her voice fierce. "Come inside. We're drinking wine and making plans." They sat on Natasha's cream-colored couch, a bottle of Merlot between them, and Gabrielle told her everything. The touches, the necklace, the hotel keycard. Natasha listened, her face growing darker with each detail. "What do you want to do?" Natasha asked finally. "Because I know you, Gabby. You're not the type to cry and forgive. You're your father's daughter." Gabrielle thought about her father, Bernard Hughes, who taught her that respect matters more than love, that actions speak louder than words, that a person shows you who they are through what they do when they think no one's watching. "I want him to understand what he's lost," Gabrielle said. "Not through me begging or crying or making a scene. I want him to wake up one day and realize that the best thing in his life walked away, and he has no one to blame but himself." "Then we start tomorrow," Natasha said. "First thing we call Jerome Patterson. He was your dad's lawyer, and he's absolutely vicious in divorce court." Gabrielle nodded. She finished her wine and borrowed pajamas from Natasha, then lay in the guest bedroom staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow her old life would end. The day after, her new one would begin. And Alexander would discover that underestimating her was the biggest mistake of his life. She fell asleep planning her first moves, and for the first time in months, she didn't dream about trying to fix what was broken. She dreamed about building something new. At the plaza, Alexander realized his wife was gone around 1 a.m. He called her phone 17 times. It went straight to voicemail. He told himself she'd gone home early, felt sick, had a headache. He told himself anything except the truth. In room 2847, Rebecca waited for him until 3, then left angry and confused, the diamond necklace cold against her skin. And in Tribeca, Gabrielle slept soundly, the hotel keycard still in her clutch, evidence she'd never need because the truth was already burning down everything Alexander thought he'd built. Alexander stood in the marble foyer of their penthouse apartment, his phone pressed to his ear, listening to Gabrielle's voicemail for the 23rd time. Her voice was calm, professional, the message she'd recorded 2 years ago when she still answered unknown numbers with optimism. You've reached Gabrielle Hughes. Please leave a message. Not Gabrielle Sterling. She'd kept her father's name after the wedding, said it honored his memory. Alexander had found it charming then, a quirk of an independent woman. Now it felt like a warning he should have heeded. He walked through the apartment, noting what was missing. Her toiletries from the bathroom. The framed photo of her father from the nightstand. Her laptop from the home office. The jewelry box her grandmother had given her. She'd been thorough, calculated, taking only what belonged to her and leaving no trace of disturbance. The home office door stood open. Alexander's stomach dropped as he entered and saw the filing cabinet drawer hanging ajar. The contracts. The financial records. The documents he'd assured her were too boring to worry about. Trust him, he had everything handled. His hands shook as he rifled through the folders. Copies. Everything was still there, but the papers looked disturbed, rearranged. Had she photographed them? Scanned them? His mind raced through implications, legal exposure, securities violations. He'd assured his business partner Thomas were victimless crimes because everyone did it. His phone rang. Thomas Whitmore, calling at 7 a.m. We have a problem, Thomas said without preamble. The SEC received an anonymous tip about our offshore accounts. They're opening an investigation. Alexander sat down hard in his desk chair. When? The email was sent at 3 this morning. Detailed, specific, with account numbers and transaction dates. Alexander, whoever sent this knows everything. Gabrielle. Had to be. But how? She'd never shown interest in the business, always smiled and nodded when he talked about mergers and acquisitions, trusted him to handle the money while she did her charity work and yoga classes. Except that was the story he'd told himself. The truth was, Gabrielle had a master's degree in business administration from Columbia. Her father had taught her to read financial statements before she learned to drive. She'd been a consultant before they married, analyzing corporate structures and finding inefficiencies. She hadn't been disinterested. She'd been watching. Shut it down, Alexander said. Move the money, close the accounts, get everything back on shore and bury it in legitimate holdings. It's too late for that. They're already freezing assets. Alexander, did you tell anyone about these accounts? He thought about Rebecca, about late nights in hotel rooms when pillow talk turned to business, when he'd shown off to impress a woman half his age. Had he mentioned account numbers? Specific holdings? He couldn't remember. I need to go, Alexander said and ended the call. He tried Gabrielle's number again. Voicemail. He sent a text. We need to talk. Please. Whatever you think happened, let me explain. The message showed as delivered but not read. By 10 a.m, his company's stock had dropped 4%. By noon it was down 12%. Financial news websites picked up the story, speculation running wild about Sterling Enterprises' offshore holdings and potential tax evasion. Alexander's lawyer called, asking about the SEC investigation. His accountant called, panicked about subpoenas. His mother called from Connecticut, asking if the news reports were true. He ignored them all. At 2 p.m, a courier delivered an envelope to the penthouse. Inside were divorce papers already filed, seeking dissolution of marriage on grounds of irreconcilable differences. The asset division was spelled out in brutal detail. Half of everything calculated down to the dollar. But there was more. Attached was a list of documents Gabrielle's legal team intended to subpoena. Business records, financial statements, emails between Alexander and Thomas discussing their offshore strategies. Everything that would prove he'd lied to investors, manipulated stock prices, and violated securities laws. Unless he agreed to her terms. The divorce settlement included a clause that if Alexander contested anything, Gabrielle would cooperate fully with federal investigators. If he signed without argument, she'd claim ignorance of his business practices and offer no testimony. It was elegant. Brutal and elegant. Alexander called Jerome Patterson, the lawyer whose signature appeared on the divorce papers. The receptionist put him through immediately. "Mr. Sterling," Jerome said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years practicing law. "I wondered when you'd call. I want to speak to my wife. Mrs. Hughes has no interest in speaking with you. All communication goes through me. This is absurd. We can work this out like adults." "You're absolutely right," Jerome said. "Which is why my client has offered you very reasonable terms. Sign the papers, accept the asset division, and move forward with your life." "She's blackmailing me." "No, she's protecting herself. There's a difference. You involved her in your financial schemes by using joint accounts and putting her name on documents she never read. Now she's extracting herself from your problems. I'd call that smart, not criminal." Alexander's jaw clenched. "I need time. You have 48 hours. After that, we assume you're contesting, and Mrs. Hughes will schedule a meeting with federal investigators. Have a pleasant afternoon, Mr. Sterling." The line went dead. Alexander threw his phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen cracked. He stood in the center of his living room, the space suddenly feeling enormous and empty, and understood that Gabrielle had planned this perfectly. She hadn't confronted him at the gala. Hadn't made a scene or demanded explanations. She'd simply collected evidence, protected herself, and walked away. And now she held every card, every piece of leverage, every scrap of power in a situation he'd created by underestimating her. His phone buzzed from where it lay on the floor. Rebecca, asking why he hadn't called her back, saying they needed to talk about their future together. Alexander looked at the message and laughed, the sound bitter and harsh in the silent apartment. Future. What future? His company was crumbling. His marriage was over. His wife had disappeared like smoke, leaving him with nothing but the consequences of his own choices. He picked up the divorce papers and read through them again, looking for loopholes, finding none. Jerome Patterson was too good. Gabrielle was too smart. And Alexander was exactly where he deserved to be. Alone. Gabrielle sat in Jerome Patterson's corner office overlooking Central Park, a cup of coffee cooling on the table beside her. The lawyer was 63, sharp-eyed, with silver hair and a reputation for destroying opponents in court. Her father had trusted him completely. "He'll sign," Jerome said, reviewing notes on his tablet. "He has no choice. The SEC investigation alone will consume millions in legal fees, and that's before potential criminal charges. Your offer is his best option." "How long before the divorce is final?" Gabrielle asked. "In New York, with uncontested proceedings, 6 months from filing. We filed yesterday, so you're looking at July. 6 months. Half a year before she was legally free of Alexander Sterling and everything he represented." Gabrielle nodded, accepting this timeline like she'd accepted every other detail of her new reality. "What about the business?" she asked. "The company shares in my name? You own 20% of Sterling Enterprises outright from the investment your father made 8 years ago. Those shares are yours free and clear, not subject to division. Currently valued at around $14 million, though that number's dropping daily." Gabrielle considered this. Her father had invested in Alexander's startup when they were first dating, believing in the young entrepreneur's vision. Bernard Hughes had been a good judge of character in business, less so in his daughter's romantic choices. "I want to sell my shares," Gabrielle said. Quietly. "Find a buyer who'll pay fair value and get me out completely." Jerome made a note. "That's wise. Distance yourself from his problems. I know several private equity firms that might be interested." They spent another hour discussing details. Property division, retirement accounts, the summer house in the Hamptons that Gabrielle had no interest in keeping. By the time she left Jerome's office, her head ached from information overload, but her path forward was clear. Natasha met her for lunch at a bistro in Soho. Her friend looked fierce in a royal blue suit, her natural hair pulled back in an elegant style. "How'd it go?" Natasha asked after they'd ordered. "Jerome thinks Alexander will sign within 48 hours. The SEC investigation is scaring him." "Good. He should be scared." Natasha leaned forward. "Have you thought about what you want to do next? Career-wise?" Gabrielle had thought about little else during sleepless nights in Natasha's guest room. Before marrying Alexander, she'd worked as a consultant, helping mid-sized companies restructure and improve efficiency. She'd been good at it, successful, fulfilled. Then Alexander had asked her to quit, said he wanted a wife who could focus on their future family, travel with him, support his career. She'd agreed because she loved him and believed in building a life together. Looking back, she saw it clearly. He'd wanted her dependent, unthreatening, grateful. "I want to start my own firm," Gabrielle said. "Business consulting focused on helping companies that are struggling. Small operations that can't afford the big consulting groups." Natasha's face lit up. "That's perfect. You were brilliant at that work. I'd need capital. Office space. Clients. You have capital from the settlement. Your father left you a trust fund. And clients will come because you're that good." Natasha paused. "I might know someone who could help. Richard Cole. He was your dad's business partner back in the day before they sold the real estate company. He's semi-retired now but still connected." Gabrielle remembered Richard vaguely from childhood. A kind man with a booming laugh who'd sent flowers to her father's funeral and checked in on her afterward. "Could you set up a meeting?" Gabrielle asked. "I'll call him this afternoon." Their food arrived, but Gabrielle barely tasted it. Her mind was already racing ahead, imagining office space, business cards, the satisfaction of building something that belonged entirely to her. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Rebecca. We need to talk about Alexander." Gabrielle stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it and blocked the number. She had no interest in conversations with her husband's mistress, no curiosity about their relationship or its current state. That chapter of her life was closed. "Everything okay?" Natasha asked. "Perfect," Gabrielle said and meant it. That evening, back at Natasha's penthouse, Gabrielle created a business plan. She outlined services, projected costs, identified potential clients from her old network. The work consumed her, filling hours that might otherwise have been spent thinking about Alexander or dwelling on betrayal. Around 11 her phone rang. "Jerome Patterson." "He signed," the lawyer said. "All of it. Asset division, terms, everything. He'll have the signed documents to my office by Monday morning." Relief flooded through Gabrielle, so intense it almost felt like grief. That fast. His company lost 22% of its value today. The board is calling for his resignation. He's desperate to contain the damage, which means accepting your terms and hoping you stay silent. "I will," Gabrielle said. "I have no interest in destroying him. I just want out." "You're more generous than I'd be," Jerome said. "Get some rest, Gabrielle. The hard part's over." But as Gabrielle ended the call and stared out at the Manhattan skyline, she knew that wasn't quite true. The hard part wasn't leaving Alexander. It was figuring out who she was without him, rebuilding an identity that didn't include wife, or Mrs. Sterling, or any of the roles she'd played for 5 years. She opened her laptop and kept working on her business plan, sketching out a future that belonged only to her. And somewhere across the city, Alexander signed away half his assets and whatever remained of his dignity, learning too late that some mistakes can't be fixed with apologies or promises. They can only be survived. Richard Cole's office occupied the 20th floor of a building near Union Square, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. The man himself was 71, broad-shouldered despite his age, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "You look just like your father," he said as Gabrielle sat across from his desk. Same determination in the eyes. "Bernard would be proud of how you're handling this situation. Natasha told you what happened? Enough to know you're making smart choices." Richard leaned back in his chair. "So, you want to start a consulting firm? Tell me why." Gabrielle had prepared for this question, but sitting across from her father's old partner, she found herself speaking from the heart instead of from rehearsed talking points. "Because I'm good at it," she said. "Because I know what it feels like to watch something fall apart and wish someone had shown you the cracks before they became fractures. Because I spent 5 years making myself smaller to fit into someone else's vision, and I'm done with that." Richard smiled. "That's the Bernard Hughes I remember. Direct, honest, no nonsense." He pulled a file from his drawer. "I've been thinking about your situation. You'll need clients, references, credibility. I can help with that." "I'm not looking for charity," Gabrielle said carefully. "Good, because I'm not offering it. I'm offering business. I consult for 6 companies right now, all of them needing exactly the kind of restructuring expertise you have. I'm too old to take on more work, but if you're willing, I'd like to refer them to you." Gabrielle's heart raced. "You do that. Your father saved my career twice. Once in 1989 when I nearly bankrupted us with a bad investment, and again in 1997 when I wanted to quit during a market downturn. He never let me give up and he never let me fail. Helping his daughter isn't charity. It's paying a debt." They spent 2 hours discussing logistics. Richard would introduce her to potential clients, vouch for her expertise, help her navigate the initial months of building a client base. In exchange, she'd take on the overflow work he couldn't handle, giving him time to ease into full retirement. "One more thing," Richard said as their meeting ended. "Office space. I own this building. There's a suite on the 18th floor, empty right now. Yours if you want it, below market rate for the first year." Gabrielle felt tears threatening but blinked them back. "Why are you doing this?" "Because your father believed in lifting people up and I learned from the best." Richard stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to entrepreneurship, Gabrielle. It's going to be a rough ride, but you're built for it." She left his office feeling lighter than she had in months. On the street, she called Natasha with the news, then Jerome to discuss next steps for the business entity formation. By the end of the week, Hughes Consulting LLC existed on paper. By the end of the month, Gabrielle had moved into her new office, hired a part-time assistant named Felicia, and signed her first client, a struggling manufacturing company in New Jersey. Alexander's world, meanwhile, continued to collapse. The SEC investigation expanded. Major investors pulled out. The board of Sterling Enterprises voted him out as CEO, installing a crisis management team to salvage what remained. Gabrielle saw the news on financial websites but felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just a distant acknowledgement that consequences existed in the world and sometimes caught up to people who'd convinced themselves they were immune. Rebecca texted from a new number. "He promised me things. Made me believe we had a future. Now he won't return my calls." Gabrielle blocked the number again. She had no sympathy for a woman who'd helped destroy a marriage, and no interest in being anyone's therapist or savior. Her focus was her business. Felicia proved invaluable, organized and efficient, handling scheduling and client communications. Richard introduced Gabrielle to contacts across industries. Word spread about the sharp consultant who could diagnose problems and implement solutions. By March, Hughes Consulting had 4 active clients and a waiting list. Gabrielle worked 12-hour days, loved every minute of it, and fell into bed exhausted in the apartment she'd rented in Brooklyn, a bright loft with exposed beams and skylight windows. She avoided Manhattan social events where she might encounter Alexander. She declined interview requests from business reporters curious about the Sterling Enterprises scandal. She built her new life quietly, deliberately, with the same strategic planning she'd used to exit her marriage. Jerome called in mid-April. "The divorce will be final next month. Alexander's lawyers are scrambling to hide assets, but we've documented everything. You'll get your settlement in full." "And the SEC investigation?" "Ongoing. He might face charges, might not. Depends on what they can prove and whether someone decides to cooperate with prosecutors." Jerome paused. "You haven't heard from him?" "Not since the day after I left." "Why?" "He's been asking about you. Wants to know if you're doing okay, if you need anything. His lawyer calls mine every few weeks." Gabrielle closed her eyes. Even now, Alexander thought he could manage the narrative, position himself as the concerned husband rather than the cheating liar. "Tell him nothing," Gabrielle said. "I'm not his concern anymore." Done. She hung up and returned to the financial projections on her screen. Her company was growing faster than expected. She'd need to hire another consultant soon, maybe 2. The thought thrilled her, this tangible evidence that she'd built something real from the ashes of her old life. That evening, Natasha dragged her to a gallery opening in Chelsea. Gabrielle protested but eventually gave in, changing into a simple red dress and meeting her friend at the venue. The art was modern, abstract, not really to Gabrielle's taste. But the wine was good, and Natasha was in rare form, making her laugh with running commentary about the other attendees. "Don't look now," Natasha murmured, "but there's a guy at 3 o'clock who's been staring at you for the past 10 minutes. Gabrielle glanced over. Tall, black, well-dressed in casual slacks and a button-down shirt. He caught her looking and smiled, raising his wine glass slightly. "He's cute," Natasha said. "You should talk to him." "I'm not ready for that. It's been 4 months. I'm not saying marry the man. I'm saying have a conversation that doesn't involve financial statements or divorce lawyers." Before Gabrielle could argue, Natasha had waved the man over. He approached with an easy confidence, extending his hand. "Dante Morrison," he said. "I hope you don't mind the interruption." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his smile genuine. Gabrielle found herself relaxing slightly. "Gabrielle Hughes. And this is my friend Natasha." They talked for 20 minutes about the art, the gallery, the ridiculous price of wine at these events. Dante owned a tech startup focused on educational software. He was funny, self-deprecating, and showed no signs of recognizing her name or connecting her to the Sterling Enterprises scandal. When Natasha excused herself to the bathroom, Dante said, "I'd really like to buy you coffee sometime." Just coffee, no pressure. Gabrielle hesitated. She wasn't ready for dating, wasn't sure she'd ever be ready after Alexander. But something in Dante's open expression made her want to say yes. "Just coffee," she agreed. "Just coffee," he confirmed, and they exchanged numbers. Later, in the taxi heading back to Brooklyn, Natasha grinned at her. "See? The world has good men in it too. It was just coffee plans. It's a start." Gabrielle looked out at the city lights and allowed herself to imagine it. A future that included possibilities beyond work and revenge and rebuilding. A future where maybe, eventually, she could trust someone again. But for now, she had a business to grow and a divorce to finalize. Romance could wait. Alexander stood outside the office building near Union Square, checking the address for the third time. Hughes Consulting LLC, 18th floor. He'd hired a private investigator to find her, paid $5,000 to learn what Gabrielle had built in the months since she left. The information had stung. She was thriving, successful, mentioned in business publications as one of New York's rising consultants. She'd taken the wreckage of their marriage and turned it into fuel for a new life, while he was still sorting through the debris of his old one. The SEC had dropped the investigation last week, insufficient evidence to prosecute. Alexander's lawyers had celebrated. He'd felt nothing. Sterling Enterprises was gone, absorbed by a larger firm in a merger that left him with a fraction of his former wealth. His reputation was destroyed. His career was over. And Gabrielle had walked away clean. He took the elevator to the 18th floor, ignoring the receptionist's questions, and pushed through the glass doors marked Hughes Consulting. A young woman at the desk looked up, startled. "I'm here to see Gabrielle Hughes," Alexander said. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but she'll see me. Tell her it's Alexander." Felicia's eyes widened with recognition. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then replaced it with a carefully neutral expression. "Mrs. Hughes will give you 5 minutes. Please wait here." 10 minutes later, Felicia led him to a conference room. Gabrielle entered moments after, and Alexander's breath caught. She looked different. Confident. Her hair was styled differently, shorter and more professional. She wore a navy blue suit that he'd never seen before, fitted and expensive. She looked successful. She looked happy. 5 minutes, Gabrielle said, remaining standing. "What do you want, Alexander?" "I wanted to see you. To talk. We have nothing to talk about. The divorce is final in 3 weeks. After that, we'll be strangers. We were married for 5 years. That has to mean something." Gabrielle's expression didn't change. "It meant something until you decided it didn't. Until you put your hands on another woman, lied to my face, and treated our marriage like a convenience instead of a commitment. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you lost your company. You're sorry your life imploded. But you're not actually sorry for what you did to me." Alexander tried to step closer, but Gabrielle held up a hand. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't come near me, don't touch me, don't pretend this is about anything except you trying to feel better about yourself. I loved you. No, you loved the idea of me. The trophy wife, the trust fund, the connections my father left behind. But you never loved me enough to be faithful, to be honest, to treat me like an equal partner." Gabrielle's voice remained steady. "And I wasted 5 years figuring that out." She opened the folder she'd brought and slid papers across the conference table. "This is an accounting of every asset you tried to hide during the divorce. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. The property in Montana you bought under your mother's name. The art collection you stored in a warehouse in New Jersey. My lawyers found all of it." Alexander's stomach dropped. "How did you? You underestimated me. Again." Gabrielle tapped the papers. "You have 2 choices. Accept the settlement as written with these additional assets included, or I go back to Jerome and we refile everything. This time I won't be generous. This isn't generous. You're taking everything. I'm taking what I'm owed. There's a difference." Gabrielle checked her watch. "Your 5 minutes are up. Felicia will show you out." "Gabrielle, please. Can't we just—" "No." The word was final. "We can't work it out, we can't be friends, we can't have coffee and pretend the past didn't happen. You made your choices and now you get to live with them. Just like I'm living with mine." She walked to the door, opened it and waited. Alexander looked at her, this woman he'd married and lost, and understood that he'd destroyed something irreplaceable. Not just the marriage, but her trust, her love, her willingness to see him as anything except a man who'd failed her. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said quietly. "I already have," Gabrielle replied. "It turns out I was looking for myself." He left the conference room, walked past Felicia's sympathetic expression, and took the elevator down to the street. Behind him, Gabrielle returned to her office, sat at her desk and pulled up the next client file. She didn't cry. Didn't feel angry or vindicated or anything except a distant relief that the confrontation was over. Alexander had been a chapter in her life, and now that chapter was closed. Jerome called that afternoon. "Alexander's lawyers just contacted me. He's agreed to your revised terms. Everything including the hidden assets." "Good," Gabrielle said. "Draw up the final papers. You're sure you don't want to push for more? We could go after penalties, emotional distress." "I want to be done, Jerome. Just get me the settlement and close this out." 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in May, Gabrielle's divorce became final. She was in a meeting with a client when Felicia texted the news. She finished the presentation, walked the client to the elevator, then returned to her office and closed the door. For 5 minutes, she sat in silence, processing the weight of finality. Then she opened her laptop and got back to work. That evening, Natasha insisted on taking her to dinner. They went to a rooftop restaurant in Brooklyn, ordered too much food and toasted to new beginnings. "How do you feel?" Natasha asked. "Free," Gabrielle said and realized it was true. Her phone buzzed. Dante asking if she was still up for coffee that weekend. They'd been texting on and off for weeks, easy conversation that never felt pressured or complicated. She typed back, "Coffee sounds perfect." Across the city, Alexander sat in his nearly empty apartment, most of the furniture sold to cover legal fees, and wondered how he'd ended up here. The answer, when he was honest with himself, was simple. He'd taken a good woman for granted, and she'd refused to let him get away with it. The lesson came too late to save what he'd lost, but maybe, eventually, it would be enough to help him become someone better. Gabrielle didn't think about him at all. June arrived with perfect weather and expanding possibilities. Gabrielle hired 2 new consultants, both women with impressive credentials who'd been overlooked by larger firms. Patricia, 47, had 20 years of experience in supply chain management. Simone, 31, specialized in digital transformation for traditional businesses. "This is going to sound strange," Patricia said during her first week, "but I've never worked somewhere where I felt this valued. Thank you for taking a chance on me." Gabrielle looked up from her laptop. "It's not a chance. You're one of the best in your field. The fact that other firms couldn't see that says more about them than you." The company expanded into the suite next door. Felicia hired an intern, a sharp business student from NYU named Tasha. Revenue projections for the year had already exceeded Gabrielle's most optimistic estimates. Richard Cole stopped by one afternoon with bagels and advice. "You're doing something special here," he said, looking around the busy office. "Your father would be impressed." "I wish he could see it," Gabrielle admitted. "He can. Wherever he is, Bernard's watching his daughter build an empire, and he's proud as hell." They sat in her office and Richard shared stories about her father. Business deals and failures, moments of triumph and despair. Gabrielle absorbed each detail, grateful for this connection to a man she still missed daily. "Have you thought about expanding beyond New York?" Richard asked. "Maybe eventually. Right now, I want to build a solid foundation. Do the work well, build a reputation, make sure every client gets exactly what they need." "Smart. Don't grow faster than your infrastructure can support." Richard paused. "And what about your personal life?" All work and no play makes Gabrielle a dull consultant. She laughed. "I'm going on a date this weekend actually. Coffee with a guy I met at a gallery." "The tech entrepreneur?" Natasha mentioned him. Of course she did. Gabrielle shook her head fondly. "It's just coffee. I'm not ready for anything serious. Take your time. But don't close yourself off completely. Not all men are Alexander." The coffee date happened Saturday afternoon at a small cafe in the West Village. Dante was already there when she arrived, reading something on his phone and looking relaxed in jeans and a green pullover. "You actually came," he said, standing to greet her. "I was half convinced you'd cancel." "Why would I cancel?" "Because you're brilliant and beautiful and probably have 100 better options for Saturday afternoon." Gabrielle felt herself blushing. "That's quite an assumption." "Is it wrong?" "Completely wrong. I spent yesterday reviewing financial statements and arguing with a client's CFO about expense categorization. My Saturday plans peaked at laundry and maybe ordering Thai food. They ordered coffee and settled into a corner table. Conversation flowed easily. Dante talked about his company, the challenges of educational technology, his frustration with venture capitalists who didn't understand long-term vision. Gabrielle found herself relaxing, laughing at his stories, sharing details about her own work. "So you just started this company from scratch?" Dante asked. "That's incredibly brave. Or incredibly reckless. Some days I'm not sure which. What made you decide to do it?" Gabrielle considered how much to share. The whole truth felt too heavy for a first date, but she didn't want to lie. "I needed a fresh start," she said carefully. "And I realized I was good at something, so why not build a business around it?" Dante nodded, seeming to sense there was more to the story but not pushing. They talked for 2 hours until the cafe staff started giving them pointed looks about taking up the table. Outside, Dante said, "I know this was supposed to be just coffee, but I really enjoyed talking with you. Would you want to do this again? Dinner maybe?" Gabrielle hesitated. She liked him, felt drawn to his easy manner and genuine curiosity. But the part of her that Alexander had damaged whispered warnings about trust and vulnerability. "I'd like that," she said finally. "But I should be honest. I'm recently divorced and I'm not looking for anything complicated right now." "Complicated is overrated anyway," Dante said with a smile. "How about we aim for uncomplicated dinner and good conversation? That sounds manageable." They exchanged a friendly hug and went their separate ways. Gabrielle walked through Washington Square Park, watching street performers and families enjoying the sunshine, and felt something that had been absent for months. Back at work Monday, she dove into a new project. A client was struggling with employee retention, losing talented staff to competitors despite competitive salaries. Gabrielle spent 3 days interviewing employees at all levels, identifying not a money problem but a culture problem. Management didn't listen. Ideas were dismissed. Talented people felt undervalued and invisible. The fix wasn't raises. It was respect. Her presentation to the CEO was blunt. "You're hemorrhaging talent because you treat people like replaceable parts. Start seeing them as humans with ideas worth hearing or keep watching them leave." The CEO looked stunned. His CFO looked angry. But 2 weeks later they implemented every suggestion Gabrielle made, and the following month, not a single person quit. Word spread. Hughes Consulting became known as the firm that told uncomfortable truths and delivered real results. Gabrielle's calendar filled months in advance. Dante took her to dinner at an Italian place in Soho. Then they caught a movie. Then they spent a Sunday afternoon walking the High Line and arguing playfully about whether technology could actually improve education or just created expensive distractions. "You're a cynic," Dante accused. "I'm a realist," Gabrielle countered. "I've seen too many companies chase shiny new tech instead of fixing fundamental problems. What if the tech is the fix? Then show me data, not marketing materials." He laughed and bought her ice cream, and they sat on a bench watching the sunset paint the Hudson River gold and orange. "I like you," Dante said suddenly. "I know we're keeping this casual and that's fine. But I want you to know, I really like spending time with you." Gabrielle's defenses rose automatically, but she forced herself to be honest. "I like spending time with you too. I'm just, still figuring things out. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." The simplicity of that statement, the lack of pressure or expectation, made something tight in Gabrielle's chest loosen. That night she called Natasha and told her about the date. "He sounds perfect," Natasha said. "Nobody's perfect. You know what I mean. He sounds like a good guy who's interested in you, not your money or connections or what you can do for him." Gabrielle thought about Alexander, who'd seen her primarily as an asset, a beautiful accessory to his ambitious life. Dante asked her opinions, challenged her ideas, seemed genuinely interested in what she thought and felt. "Yeah," she said softly. "He does seem like a good guy. Then let yourself enjoy it. You deserve something good, Gabby." Later, lying in bed in her Brooklyn loft, Gabrielle stared at the ceiling and let herself imagine a future that included both professional success and personal happiness. For the first time since leaving Alexander, those things didn't feel mutually exclusive. They felt possible. Rebecca Chambers sat in a coffee shop in Midtown, her phone face up on the table, waiting for it to ring. It never did. Alexander had stopped answering her calls 3 months ago, right around the time Sterling Enterprises collapsed completely. She'd lost her job when the company dissolved. Lost the apartment Alexander had helped her rent. Lost the illusion that she'd been anything except a temporary distraction for a married man going through a midlife crisis. The diamond necklace sat in a pawn shop somewhere in Queens, sold for a fraction of its value to pay rent. Rebecca had learned too late that promises whispered in hotel rooms meant nothing when the money dried up. She pulled out her phone and tried Gabrielle's number again. Blocked like the last 3 times. She thought maybe, just maybe, if she explained how Alexander had manipulated her too, Gabrielle might help. Might see her as another victim instead of a villain. But Gabrielle Hughes had made her position clear. No contact, no conversation, no absolution. Rebecca paid for her untouched coffee and left, walking toward the subway with no particular destination in mind. She was 29 years old, unemployed, with a resume that now included the scandal of being the other woman in a very public divorce. Some mistakes, she was learning, didn't come with second chances. Across town, Alexander's lawyer delivered bad news over the phone. The revised settlement is final. You need to liquidate the Montana property and the art collection by the end of the month. After legal fees and debt repayment, you'll have approximately $200,000 remaining. $200,000. Alexander had been worth $40 million 2 years ago. The mathematics of his fall were staggering. What about the house in the Hamptons? That was Gabrielle's in the settlement. She sold it last month. Of course she did. Gabrielle had extracted herself from every part of their shared life with surgical precision, leaving him with nothing except the consequences of his choices. Alexander hung up and looked around the studio apartment in Queens he'd rented after selling the penthouse. 1 room, a tiny kitchen, bathroom that barely fit a shower. This was his life now. His mother called weekly, voice heavy with disappointment. His few remaining friends had distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Even Thomas Whitmore, his business partner who'd helped orchestrate the offshore accounts, had disappeared to somewhere in Europe. Alexander was alone with his choices, and they made terrible company. Meanwhile, Gabrielle's company celebrated landing its biggest client yet. A national retail chain needed help restructuring operations across 87 stores. The contract was worth more than $1 million and would establish Hughes Consulting as a major player in the industry. "This is incredible," Patricia said at the staff meeting. "How did you land this?" Richard Cole made an introduction, but the client chose us based on our track record. They want results and we've proven we deliver. Gabrielle looked around at her team. This is going to mean long hours and intense work. Everyone okay with that? Unanimous agreement. This group she'd assembled, these talented people who'd been overlooked or underestimated elsewhere, were hungry to prove themselves. They started the project in August, diving deep into data and operations. Gabrielle spent weeks visiting stores, talking to managers and employees, identifying inefficiencies and opportunities. The work was consuming and exhausting and exactly what she needed. Dante complained that he never saw her anymore. Gently, playfully, but the complaint was real. "I know," Gabrielle said over a quick lunch between meetings. "This project is just massive. I get it. Building something takes time." Dante reached across the table and took her hand. "Just don't forget to come up for air occasionally." The casual touch, the warmth of his palm against hers, made Gabrielle realize how much she'd come to depend on his presence in her life. They'd been seeing each other for 4 months now, still technically casual but feeling increasingly like something more. "Have dinner with me this weekend," Dante said. "My place. I'll cook, we can actually talk without you checking your phone every 5 minutes. Deal." Saturday evening, Gabrielle took a taxi to Dante's apartment in Brooklyn Heights. He'd made salmon and roasted vegetables, set the table with actual placemats and candles, put on jazz music that drifted softly through the space. "You went all out," Gabrielle said, impressed. "You're worth the effort." They ate and talked about everything except work. Dante told her about his childhood in Atlanta, his parents who'd both been teachers, his decision to move to New York for graduate school. Gabrielle shared carefully edited stories about growing up in Manhattan, her father's influence, the business lessons she'd absorbed without realizing. "What about your ex-husband?" Dante asked carefully. "You never talk about him." Gabrielle's defenses rose automatically. "There's not much to say. We wanted different things. It ended. That's the shortest divorce story I've ever heard. It's the only one you're getting tonight." Dante held up his hands. "Fair enough. Your past, your choice what to share." The lack of pressure made Gabrielle want to tell him everything. How Alexander had betrayed her, how she'd walked away and systematically dismantled his world, how revenge had felt satisfying until it just felt empty. But those stories belonged to a version of herself she was trying to leave behind. The angry woman, the vindictive ex-wife. She wanted to be someone new with Dante. He cheated, she said finally. I found out, left and didn't look back. That's the whole story. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm not. It led me here. Gabrielle gestured around the apartment, meaning not just the physical space but the life she'd built, the person she'd become. After dinner they moved to the couch. Dante put on a movie, but neither of them paid much attention. They talked instead about dreams and fears and the strange vulnerability of building something from nothing. Can I ask you something? Dante said during a comfortable silence. Sure. What are we doing? This. He gestured between them. I know we said casual, but 4 months in, I'm starting to feel like this is more than casual. At least for me. Gabrielle's heart raced. This was the moment she'd been avoiding, the conversation that required honesty and risk and the possibility of getting hurt again. I don't know, she admitted. I care about you. A lot. But I'm also scared of getting this wrong, of trusting someone and having it blow up in my face. I can't promise it won't blow up. Nobody can promise that. Dante took her hand again. But I can promise I'll be honest with you. No games, no lies, no secret hotel rooms with other people. The reference to her marriage was gentle but clear. Dante knew more than she'd told him, probably from internet searches or mutual friends. But he'd waited for her to share on her own terms. Okay, Gabrielle said. Let's try this. Really try, not casual dating but actual relationship trying. Yeah. Dante's smile was bright enough to light the whole room. He kissed her, soft and careful, and Gabrielle let herself sink into the moment without analyzing or protecting herself. Later, heading home in a taxi, she texted Natasha, I think I'm in a relationship. The response came immediately, finally. About time you let yourself be happy. Gabrielle smiled at her phone and watched the city lights blur past the window. Her business was thriving. Her personal life was opening up. The divorce was final, the past was settled, and the future felt wide open. Somewhere in Queens, Alexander scrolled through photos on his phone, pictures of a life that no longer existed. A beautiful wife who'd loved him until he gave her reasons not to. A successful company he'd destroyed through greed and arrogance. He deleted the photos one by one, accepting that some things once broken stayed broken. The business conference took place at a hotel in Boston, 3 days of panels and networking for entrepreneurs and consultants. Gabrielle had initially declined the invitation, too busy with the retail chain project. But Patricia had insisted she go, networking with industry leaders, establishing Hughes Consulting's reputation beyond New York. The keynote speaker was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Gabrielle grabbed coffee in the hotel lobby and found a seat near the back of the ballroom. The lights dimmed and the speaker took the stage. Dante Morrison, CEO of Morrison Educational Technologies. Gabrielle nearly spit out her coffee. He hadn't mentioned speaking at this conference. She watched him present, confident and engaging, discussing how technology could democratize education if designed thoughtfully and implemented carefully. He made eye contact with the audience periodically. When his gaze landed on her, his presentation faltered for half a second, surprise flashing across his face before he recovered smoothly. After the keynote, Dante found her in the lobby. You could have mentioned you were speaking, Gabrielle said. You could have mentioned you were attending. He grinned. This is a nice surprise. Are you here all 3 days? Unfortunately, yes. Patricia threatened to fire me if I tried to skip. Good. Have dinner with me tonight. There's a place near the waterfront I've been wanting to try. They had dinner at a seafood restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor. The food was excellent, the conversation better. Dante talked about the conference circuit, the strange performance aspect of public speaking, his nervousness despite years of practice. You looked completely natural up there, Gabrielle said. That's what practice does. Inside, I'm always convinced I'll blank on everything and just stand there stammering. Never happens? Not yet. But there's always tomorrow's panel. Gabrielle laughed. They'd been together 6 months now officially, and she'd never felt this comfortable with someone. Dante knew about her divorce, the broad strokes if not all the details, and never pushed for more than she wanted to share. The conference continued over the next 2 days. Gabrielle attended panels on business restructuring and change management. She networked with other consultants, exchanged business cards, discussed potential collaborations. On the final evening, she joined a group dinner with conference attendees. Dante was there, along with a dozen other entrepreneurs and consultants. The conversation ranged from industry trends to horror stories about difficult clients. A woman across the table, Vanessa Chen, Asked Gabrielle about her company's growth. We started 18 months ago with just me. Now we have 7 employees and more work than we can handle. That's impressive. What's your secret? Gabrielle considered the question. Hire good people and get out of their way. Listen to clients even when you don't like what they're saying. And don't be afraid to tell uncomfortable truths. Vanessa laughed. The last one is the hardest. It gets easier with practice. After dinner, Dante walked Gabrielle back to her hotel. I've been thinking, he said as they reached the lobby. Morrison Tech is expanding into corporate training. We're looking for consultants who understand organizational change. Would Hughes Consulting be interested in partnering? Gabrielle stopped walking. Are you asking because we're dating or because you think we're qualified? Both, if I'm honest. I wouldn't work with someone unqualified just because I'm sleeping with them. But I also wouldn't ignore a talented partner just because we happen to be in a relationship. I'd need to see the details. Scope, timeline, expectations. I'll send everything next week. You can review it with your team, decide if it makes sense. Dante paused. This won't be weird for us, right? Mixing business and personal? We're both professionals. We'll figure it out. They said goodnight in the lobby and Gabrielle rode the elevator to her room, mind already racing with possibilities. A partnership with Morrison Tech could be huge, opening doors to corporate clients and scaling Hughes Consulting faster than she'd imagined. Back in New York, she presented Dante's proposal to her team. Patricia and Simone reviewed the materials carefully, asking smart questions about deliverables and compensation. This could be really good for us, Simone said. Morrison Tech has an excellent reputation, and corporate training is a growing market. My only concern is the conflict of interest, Patricia said carefully. You're dating the CEO. I know. Which is why I want you two to take the lead on this project if we accept. I'll oversee, but you'll handle day-to-day client interaction. They discussed logistics and concerns, then voted unanimously to accept the partnership. Gabrielle called Dante with the news. My team is in. We start next month. Excellent. I'll have my lawyers draw up the contract. The partnership launched in October. Patricia and Simone worked directly with Morrison Tech's training division, developing curriculum and implementation strategies. Gabrielle stayed in the background, reviewing their work but letting her team shine. The arrangement worked beautifully. Morrison Tech got quality consulting, Hughes Consulting gained a prestigious client, and Gabrielle proved to herself that business and personal relationships could coexist without disaster. Meanwhile, Alexander's life continued its downward trajectory. He'd taken a job as a sales manager at a mid-sized firm, the kind of corporate position he'd looked down on years ago. The pay was decent, the work soul-crushing. He saw Gabrielle's name in a business magazine, featured in an article about successful women entrepreneurs. The photo showed her in a professional blue suit, confident and accomplished. Nothing like the uncertain woman who deferred to his judgment about everything. He'd created that transformation through his failures. Given her reasons to become strong and independent and successful without him. The irony was brutal. Rebecca tried calling him one last time from a new number. Alexander answered out of boredom. What do you want? He asked. I just wanted to talk. See how you're doing. I'm doing fine. You? Not great actually. I can't find work and I'm running out of money. I thought maybe you could help. Alexander laughed, the sound bitter. I can barely help myself. Whatever you thought I could give you, it's gone. Alexander, please. We had something real. No, we had hotel rooms and lies. That's not real. That's just two people being selfish and stupid. He paused. Don't call me again, Rebecca. We're not friends. We're not anything. He hung up and blocked the number, cutting the last thread connecting him to that version of himself who'd thought consequences were for other people. At Hughes Consulting's office, Gabrielle celebrated with her team. The retail chain project had concluded successfully, saving the client millions and earning Hughes Consulting industry recognition. New clients were calling daily. We need to expand, Simone said. Open an office in Boston or Chicago, hire regional teams. Not yet, Gabrielle said. Let's make sure we can sustain this growth before we scale up. Quality over quantity. You sound like your father, Patricia said with a smile. Gabrielle took that as the compliment it was meant to be. That evening, she had dinner with Dante at his apartment. He'd cooked again, this time attempting Thai food with mixed results. This tastes like what would happen if Italy and Thailand had a confused baby, Gabrielle said, laughing. I thought fusion cuisine was popular. Not when it's accidental fusion. They ordered pizza instead and talked about their respective weeks. Dante's company had secured Series B funding. Gabrielle's firm had been approached about a potential acquisition by a larger consulting group. "Are you considering it?" Dante asked. "No. I didn't build this company to sell it 18 months in. I want to grow it properly on my own terms." "Good. Don't let anyone pressure you into their timeline." Gabrielle looked at this man who'd entered her life when she wasn't looking for anyone, who'd been patient while she healed, who challenged her to be better without trying to change who she was. "I love you," she said suddenly. Dante froze, pizza slice halfway to his mouth. "What?" "I love you. I know we haven't said it yet and maybe it's too soon, but I do. I love you." His smile was brilliant. "I love you too. Have for months, actually. I was just waiting for you to get there." They abandoned the pizza and spent the rest of the evening on the couch, talking about the future for the first time. Not in hypotheticals or maybes, but in concrete plans and shared dreams. For Gabrielle, who'd spent so long building walls, the vulnerability felt terrifying and exhilarating. But she was ready. Spring arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made New York feel like the center of the universe. Gabrielle stood in the conference room of Hughes Consulting's newest expansion, a third suite on the 18th floor. The company now employed 12 people full-time, with 3 more starting next month. "This is incredible," Richard Cole said, touring the space. "2 years ago you were sitting in my office asking for help. Now look at you." "I couldn't have done it without you," Gabrielle said honestly. "You could have. It would have just taken longer." Richard squeezed her shoulder. "Your father is so proud. I feel it every day." The major contract Gabrielle had been negotiating for months finally closed. A Fortune 500 company needed help restructuring its entire operations division. The fee was substantial, the timeline aggressive, the stakes high. "This is what we've been working toward," Gabrielle told her team at the announcement meeting. "This contract establishes us as a top-tier firm. It also means we're going to be working incredibly hard for the next 6 months." Nobody complained. This team she'd built, these talented people who'd found a home at Hughes Consulting, were ready for the challenge. Dante took her to dinner that night to celebrate. They went to a steakhouse in Midtown, splurged on wine, talked about the future. "I've been thinking about something," Dante said over dessert. "We've been together for 10 months. We love each other. My lease is up next month." Gabrielle's heart raced. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I'm asking if you'd want to look for a place together. Something that's ours, not mine or yours." Moving in together felt enormous, the kind of commitment that required trust and faith in all the things Alexander had broken. But Dante wasn't Alexander. He'd proven that in 1,000 small ways over the past year. "Yes," Gabrielle said. "Let's find a place together." They spent weekends touring apartments, debating neighborhoods and layouts. Eventually, they found a 2-bedroom in Park Slope with hardwood floors and huge windows, close to both their offices. Moving day was chaos. Natasha helped pack, making running commentary about Gabrielle's terrible organizational system. Richard sent a housewarming gift, a framed photo of Gabrielle's father with an inscription, "For the daughter who made him proud." That night, surrounded by boxes in their new apartment, Dante and Gabrielle ordered Chinese food and sat on the floor eating directly from containers. "This is it," Dante said. "Our place. Our life." Gabrielle leaned against his shoulder, feeling content in a way she'd never experienced during her marriage to Alexander. This relationship was built on honesty and respect, not assumptions and convenience. "I'm happy," she said simply. "Good. You deserve to be." Work consumed the next several months. The Fortune 500 contract demanded everything Gabrielle and her team had to give. 18-hour days became normal. Weekends disappeared into work sessions and client calls. But the results were extraordinary. They identified inefficiencies, saving the client $20 million annually. They restructured departments, streamlined processes, transformed how the company operated. Industry publications took notice. Hughes Consulting was featured in Forbes, Fast Company, and The Wall Street Journal. Gabrielle did interviews, spoke at conferences, became recognized as a leader in organizational change. Alexander saw one of the articles. He was still working his sales manager job, living in Queens, slowly rebuilding financial stability. The contrast between his current life and what he'd lost was painful, but he'd learned to live with that pain. He read about Gabrielle's success with something that felt almost like pride. She'd taken the pieces of her broken marriage and built something remarkable. He'd given her motivation even if he'd never intended to. Sometimes late at night he wondered if he could reach out, apologize properly, tell her he understood now what he'd destroyed. But he knew better. Some apologies come too late and some bridges once burned stay burned. Gabrielle never thought about him at all. Her focus was forward. The Fortune 500 contract led to 3 more major clients. Hughes Consulting had to turn away business, couldn't hire fast enough to meet demand. "We need to expand," Patricia said during a strategic planning meeting. "Not just more employees. Another office, maybe 2. Gabrielle had resisted this conversation for months, worried about growing too fast. But the time was right. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it. Chicago first, then maybe San Francisco." The Chicago office opened in September, with Simone relocating to manage it. They hired 8 people, found office space in the Loop, and started building a client base in the Midwest. The growth was exhilarating and terrifying. Some nights, Gabrielle lay awake wondering if she'd taken on too much, if the company would collapse under its own expansion. But then she'd review the numbers, see the satisfied clients and talented employees, and know she was building something sustainable. Dante proposed on a Saturday afternoon in October. Nothing elaborate, just the 2 of them walking through Prospect Park, leaves turning gold and red around them. "I don't have a ring yet," he said, stopping near the lake. "I wanted to ask first, make sure you'd say yes before I spent money on jewelry you might hate." Gabrielle laughed. "Very practical. So what do you think? Want to marry me?" She thought about marriage, what it meant now versus what it had meant with Alexander. Then it had been about becoming someone's wife, fitting into a role, sacrificing parts of herself for a shared vision that turned out to be his vision. With Dante, marriage felt different. A partnership between equals, 2 people choosing each other every day. "Yes," she said. "I want to marry you." They picked out a ring together the following week, a simple emerald surrounded by small diamonds. Gabrielle wore it proudly, showing Natasha and her team, calling her mother in France with the news. Richard Cole took them to dinner to celebrate, sharing stories about her father and giving Dante the kind of subtle warning fathers usually deliver. "She's special," Richard said. "Don't make me regret approving of you." "I won't, sir," Dante promised. The wedding planning was simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate affair Gabrielle had endured with Alexander. Just close friends and family, a ceremony in a garden in Brooklyn, dinner at a restaurant they both loved. They set the date for May, giving themselves 6 months to plan while managing their respective businesses. At Hughes Consulting, the team threw Gabrielle an engagement party. Patricia made a toast about strong women building empires. Simone video called from Chicago with champagne. Even Tasha, the intern who'd been hired full-time, gave a sweet speech about Gabrielle being the kind of boss everyone deserves. That night, back at the apartment, Gabrielle and Dante sat on their couch reviewing wedding venue options. "This is nice," Dante said. "Planning a future with you. Better than your last attempt at Thai fusion? Everything's better than that disaster." Gabrielle laughed and kissed him, feeling grateful for second chances and new beginnings and the strange way life works out when you let go of what's broken and build something new. Somewhere in Queens, Alexander deleted his social media accounts, tired of seeing evidence of Gabrielle's success. It wasn't bitterness anymore, just acceptance that he'd lost something irreplaceable through his own choices. He'd learned the lesson. It came too late to save his marriage, but maybe it would help him become someone better in whatever future he could build. Gabrielle didn't think about him. She was too busy planning a wedding, running a company, and living the life she'd built from the ashes of the old one. The charity gala at the Plaza Hotel looked exactly as Gabrielle remembered. Same marble floors, same glittering chandeliers, same crowd of wealthy New Yorkers pretending to care about childhood literacy while comparing designer labels and vacation homes. But everything else was different. Gabrielle stood near the entrance in a stunning red gown, Dante at her side in a perfectly tailored suit. Her company had donated $50,000 to the cause, earning Hughes Consulting a prominent mention in the event program and a table near the front. "Nervous?" Dante asked quietly. "No," Gabrielle said and realized it was true. 2 years ago she'd walked out of this ballroom and never looked back. Now she was walking back in as a different person. Successful CEO. Engaged to a man who loved and respected her. Happy. Natasha found them in the crowd, elegant in a green dress that complemented her skin tone perfectly. "You look incredible," Natasha said, hugging Gabrielle tightly. "How does it feel to be back here?" "Honestly, it feels like closure." They made their way to their table. Richard Cole was already there, having secured an invitation through his extensive connections. Patricia had come as Gabrielle's guest, along with Simone who'd flown in from Chicago for the event. The evening unfolded with familiar rhythms. Speeches about the importance of education. A silent auction featuring luxury vacations and exclusive experiences. Dinner service that was more presentation than substance. Gabrielle saw people she recognized from 2 years ago. Some nodded in acknowledgement, clearly remembering her as Alexander's ex-wife. Others looked confused, trying to place her face without the context of scandal. She didn't care about any of it. Halfway through dinner, she saw him. Alexander, standing near the bar, looking diminished in a suit that didn't quite fit right. He was talking to someone Gabrielle didn't recognize, his expression careful and controlled. "That's him, isn't it?" Dante asked quietly. "Yes. Do you want to leave?" Gabrielle looked at her ex-husband, this man who'd once been the center of her universe and was now just another person at a charity event. She felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering hurt. Just complete indifference. "No," she said. "I don't need to leave. This is my event as much as his." Alexander noticed her eventually. Their eyes met across the ballroom. He looked startled, then something that might have been admiration crossed his face before he schooled his expression into careful neutrality. He didn't approach. Didn't try to talk to her. Just nodded once, an acknowledgement that they were both adults who could exist in the same space without drama. Gabrielle nodded back and returned her attention to her table, to the people who mattered. During the speeches, the event organizer mentioned Hughes Consulting's generous donation. Gabrielle stood briefly to acknowledge the recognition, and the applause felt genuine. After dinner, she and Dante walked out to the terrace overlooking Central Park. The night was cool but pleasant, the city lights creating a glow against the sky. "Are you okay?" Dante asked. "I'm perfect." Seeing him didn't hurt at all. "If anything, it just reminded me how far I've come. You've built something incredible. The company, your life, everything." Gabrielle leaned against the railing looking out at the park. 2 years ago, she'd stood in this hotel planning her escape. Now she was here by choice, successful and loved and complete. "I couldn't have done it without the people who believed in me," she said. "Richard, Natasha, Patricia, Simone. Everyone who saw what I could become instead of just what I'd been. You did the work, Gabby. We just supported you." Back inside, the dancing had started. Gabrielle and Dante joined the crowd on the floor, moving to music that was safe and familiar. She saw Alexander watching from the edge of the room. Not creepy or obsessive, just observing. When their eyes met again, he raised his glass slightly. A toast or maybe a goodbye. Gabrielle smiled politely and turned away, focusing on Dante and the life they were building together. Later, as they were leaving, Richard pulled her aside. "You know what your father would say if he could see you now?" the older man asked. "What?" "That his daughter took the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into fuel for the best thing. He'd say he knew you had that strength all along." Gabrielle hugged him tightly. "Thank you. For everything." In the taxi heading home, Dante held her hand and asked, "So? How does it feel to have your full circle moment?" "Honestly? It feels complete. Like I've proven to myself that I don't just survive bad things. I can thrive after them." "You're pretty amazing, you know that?" "I'm learning to believe it." They arrived at their apartment in Park Slope. The same space they'd moved into a year ago, now filled with furniture they'd chosen together and artwork from trips they'd taken and evidence of a shared life. Gabrielle changed out of the red gown and into comfortable clothes, removed her makeup, let down her hair. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone she was proud to be. The woman looking back wasn't defined by her divorce or her ex-husband's failures. She was defined by her own achievements, her own choices, her own strength. In Queens, Alexander sat in his apartment and thought about the woman in the red dress. The one who'd gotten away, who'd built an empire from the ruins of their marriage, who'd proven that she never needed him at all. He'd learned too late that love isn't about possession or control or taking someone for granted. It's about partnership and respect and showing up every day as your best self. The lesson was valuable. It just came at a cost he'd be paying for the rest of his life. But Gabrielle wasn't paying any cost. She was planning a wedding, running a company, living fully and joyfully with a man who deserved her. She fell asleep in Dante's arms, the engagement ring on her finger catching the light from the window, and dreamed about the future instead of the past. The next morning, she woke up early and went for a run through Prospect Park. The city was just beginning to stir, the sun rising over Brooklyn with the promise of another perfect day. Gabrielle ran past the lake where Dante had proposed, past the places they'd explored together, through the neighborhood they'd made their home. She thought about her father, about the lessons he'd taught her about resilience and strength and never settling for less than she deserved. She thought about the company she'd built and the people she'd hired and the difference she was making. But mostly she thought about how revenge, real revenge, isn't about destroying someone else. It's about building a life so good, so full, so complete that you realize you won just by refusing to let their failures define you. Alexander had cheated and lied and taken her for granted. And Gabrielle had walked away, built an empire, found love and created happiness on her own terms. That was the best revenge of all. Not because it hurt him, though maybe it did, but because it freed her. She finished her run and headed home, to the apartment she shared with Dante, to the life she'd built, to the future she was creating one choice at a time. And she was happy. Completely, genuinely, deeply happy.